Welcome to Inner Light, where ancient wisdom meets modern understanding. Today, we are joined by Aleksandra Ceho, an astrologer who spent over 2 decades guiding people through the language of the stars. From childhood fascination to international instructor of astrology, tarot, and hermetic philosophy, Alexandra brings a remarkable blend of cosmic insight and grounded clarity. Her work illuminates how celestial patterns shape our inner world, our choices, and even our life's rhythm. Let's let's journey into the heart of astrology with someone who has truly mastered the art of reading the sky. Welcome to the show, Alexandra. It's such an honor to have you.
Thank you, Anya. I'm so honored and there's so much pleasure and joy being here today.
Mhm. So, Alexandra, astrology has become increasingly popular, yet many still misunderstand its true depth. What do you feel is the biggest misconception people have about astrology today?
Oh my gosh. Well, all you need to do to answer that question is to go look on TikTok and Instagram, and you will find all sorts of reels that are dedicated to the glorification of the personality and lower personality traits. And so this is something that we would actually call the dark alchemy of astrology, because the original precepts of astrology is that we are divine beings. And so if you go and look at social media today, you will see anything but. And the original message of the stars and of the teachings of astrology, which came from Hermes Trismegistus and also from the Mesopotamians and also from the ancient teachings of India as well, we have lost that divinity. And so we see these glorifications of ego, of lower personality traits, of pettiness, even. People using astrology to blame or box certain behaviors and justify them. And so this is perhaps the biggest misconception that we have in astrology today. And it all comes from how the world of marketing has taken a sacred teaching and used it to glorify lower ways of being.
Hmm. Yes, absolutely. And when someone approaches astrology skeptically, what's the first piece of wisdom you offer to bridge that gap in understanding?
Oh my gosh. Well, usually people approach astrology skeptically because they have been exposed to what I call the marketing material. And so if you go into any bookstore, you will see tons and tons of books on the shelf that really only provide information on your sun sign and use that as a way or a frame of reference for how you behave, who you should date, your health, your mindset. And astrology is so much more than that. And so when I speak to people, one of the things that I emphasize about astrology is that it really is about coming to know thyself. And that what you see in the bookstores, what you see in social media is actually about boxes. And that's why people object to it. And that's why they approach it skeptically. Because, in a weird way, it would just be like saying, people from this country only behave this way, and people from that country only behave this way, except that you're ascribing it to periods of time. And so that's why they object to it. But when they come to understand that there is uniqueness and individuality that comes as a result of the date, time, and location that you were born on top of your life experiences, when they understand that you are looking at this from an energetic approach as opposed to a personality classification system, then their skepticism starts to melt away. And so I always tell people when they approach from a skeptical place, you know what? Tell me your date, time, and location of birth if you know it, and let's have a little chat. Let's give this a try before you knock it, because what you're looking at and what you're objecting to, I also object to, because it's not right.
Hmm. Yeah, that makes sense. And that also opens the door beautifully for listeners who are curious but unsure where astrology fits into their lives.
Absolutely. A lot of people have approached astrology from a place of it's going to predict how I behave, it's going to predict who I should be with. And what they don't actually understand is that your personal astrological chart is a stepping stone for growth. And so every one of us comes, we're born into this world. We all have a purpose, and we bring in the astrological energies to help fulfill that purpose. But part of fulfilling that purpose necessitates growth. And so there's going to be challenges that are involved in that. And so when you go back to the oldest teachings of astrology, as I mentioned to you, where they always talk about how we are divine beings, there is that growth mindset that is inherent in that. Not that you are this lower being and therefore you should be petty, egotistical, negative, but rather that when you encounter challenges, astrology was meant to help you supersede those challenges and become the greater being that you naturally are.
Mm-hmm. Yes, 100%. And you have taught astrology internationally for years. What core principles do you wish every beginner understood before diving into charts and interpretations?
Oh my gosh. Well, in studying astrology, there are many metaphysical energies that are inherent in that. And one of the things that really makes a good astrologer is having experience of those energies. And astrology has mainly been taught in a very mental way for a long time. And this is part of what has made it intimidating to people because they're trying to remember elements. They're trying to remember, gender, masculine and feminine. They are trying to remember the qualities, cardinal, fixed, mutable. Then they're trying to memorize the qualities of the planets. And then on top of it, the qualities of the zodiac signs themselves. And so that's a lot of things to memorize. That's almost the equivalent of asking someone, to memorize everything from med school, just in terms of the pure amount of information. And when you try and memorize all these things, it becomes very intimidating. And that's why a lot of people who have had interest in astrology have never really pursued it because it's like, oh my God, there's so much to remember here. And so I come from a metaphysical lineage via the modern mystery school. And I have spent years experiencing those energies. And so I don't have to remember what fire is like. I experience it, I know it. There's a difference between needing to memorize and knowing. And so one of the things that I always tell people is that if you want to study astrology, you really need to experience those energies so that you know them in the way that you know your best friend, in the way that you know your partner. You need to know those energies in an unmistakable and undeniable way. And then all the subtleties of astrology will reveal themselves to you. And when you know those energies, then you can start to delve into the mental work of calculating the chart and reading the planets in their qualities, in their detriments, in their exaltations, in the houses. All of those things can start to come alive when you understand the energies that underlie it. And so the best astrologers are the ones who also have that kind of metaphysical background where they have worked with the energy or all the energies that are inherent in astrology itself.
Mm-hmm. Yes, totally. And do you believe people should first explore their own natal chart or focus on understanding universal archetypes before personalizing the journey?
Oh my gosh, yes. So one of my one of my teachers in my path, his name is Sovereign. This is Miss Dave Lanyon, and he always tells people you cannot share what you don't have. So if you don't know and understand yourself, you cannot provide that depth of understanding to others. And one of the dangers of astrology is when you don't heal yourself, because what ends up happening is you end up projecting your own issues and your own judgments onto other people when you do readings. And so coming to know and understand your own chart first, understanding your values, your perspective, and also healing, traumas or aspects of the personality that are going to put down others, but basically negativity. We need to do that work first before we step in as readers and serve other people. Because if I have an issue with, let's say I judge, I don't know, water signs. Well, if I have that kind of judgment inside of me, how can I provide a compassionate, growth oriented reading for somebody else? I can't, because my lack of self knowledge, my lack of know thyself means that I do a disservice to somebody else. And so I always tell people, get to know your chart in depth first, do the healing work you need to do, experience the energies of the powers of heaven and the universe, and then step forward to serve others, because then you can do so in an empowering way. Because there's already been so much disempowerment with astrology. So we really want to, turn the tide and do things the right way.
Mm-hmm. Yes, and that guidance helps ground the practice in both structure and self awareness.
Absolutely. And one of the most beautiful things that an astrologer can accomplish is that they can help people heal their judgments of themselves. One of the reasons that I love astrology in my personal work is that when I work with people, they come to me with, X number of years of reasons why they're not a good person in some capacity. They have years of self judgment because they've taken themselves too personally. And so the things that they have done in their life and the things that they have experienced, they use as a black mark against themselves. And when I step in and I help them to understand their nature and how that nature can grow, can thrive, what its qualities and strengths are, and maybe where it doesn't do so well, that helps to alleviate some of the guilt, the suffering, and the self judgment that they have experienced in their lives. And that's a really beautiful thing, and I love it when I can help, my clients transcend that self-judgment that they've had because they've been trying to, basically be, a square peg in a round hole.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I absolutely agree. And also, the zodiac is often seen through simplified archetypes. How do these archetypes actually influence the way people express themselves or navigate their life paths?
Well, every one of us is a combination of archetypes. And so, let's define what an archetype is for a quick second here, because I think that's really important. So, an archetype is a recognizable pattern of human being. And so let me give you an example, because this is an easy one. No matter what culture in the world, no matter where we go, no matter what place and time, if I say that someone is motherly, there are shared qualities that we are all going to recognize, meaning that this person is compassionate, they are caring, they are tender, they are affectionate, right? And so archetypes are these defined, well, perhaps we can say loosely defined, um, divinities of being. And so I could equally say the same thing with the archetype of a warrior. Because the archetype of a warrior, if I say that someone's a warrior, there are certain mindsets or certain things that are going to be fairly true about them, that they're strong, that they're passionate, that they are disciplined, that they are willing to endure hardship. And we know these things to be true. And so within each and every one of us, there are multiple archetypes. Now we generally have a primary archetype, but I don't think there's anybody who could say that they are truly defined by one thing and one thing only. And so we are a mixture of these archetypes. And certain of those archetypes are strong and in the forefront, and they are aspects of ourselves that we can rely on. But then there are other archetypes that also reside within us that have their own needs, that have their own expressions and their own ways of being. And so, when we look at astrology, we also are looking at the interplay of those archetypes inside of yourself. So for everyone who's listening out there, just to give you a little bit of an example, if you've ever felt the conflict between really wanting to succeed at work and really wanting to have quality time with your family, that can be the interplay or the conflicting priorities of two different archetypes inside of you. And so when we look into astrology, we look at how these archetypes are interplaying. And so perhaps it's the warrior inside of you that really wants to succeed at work and take off and thrive and flourish and achieve. And then the mother inside of you is saying, well, my family needs my attention. And we need to balance those archetypes because neither one of them is right or wrong. What if you could have both? And when you reside those tensions between the archetypes inside of yourself, there are ways to have both. And also, you're able to prioritize in the right order. Because what if your family truly is suffering, but you're just at work? Or what if your family's perfectly fine, but you're panicking and saying that they're not and avoiding work? Right? And so when we start to bridge the gap between these archetypes and make them work synergistically within us and bridge those gaps of communication, that's when we can start to what I say or call have it all because it is possible. It's just about healing and bringing all those archetypes together to work on the same team.
Mm-hmm. Yes, that makes sense. And also, that adds an intriguing layer, reminding us that growth often comes from understanding the parts of ourselves we overlook.
Yeah. So Anya, can you perhaps give me an example of like of an area? It doesn't necessarily have to be for yourself, but if you can think of like a friend or a family member, who you think who's suffering from something, because I'd love to use that as an example.
Suffering from anything, right? Nothing specific.
No, nothing specific.
I think my mom just went through the loss of her dad recently.
That's hard. That's hard. And and so when you go through something like that, because I have people come to me after major life events in astrology all the time, right? And and so not only can you look at your natal chart, but you can also look into things like forecasting. And so let's say, for example, that your mother had some Pluto transits happening while this event occurred. And so it really opens up that well in the subconscious where those feelings of loss reside. And like let's say that she went through it and she's fine and then suddenly she's not fine. It could also be that transits have activated some of those repressed feelings because there are things that we do overlook. I mean, how many times have any of us, experienced something and then we said, "Oh, we're fine," and then later we're mad about it or we're resentful, or we get into an argument with that person and then suddenly, things we thought we were okay with, we start kind of throwing in their face, right? And so astrology can also open up those portals in the subconscious, so to speak, so that we can truly start to heal. Because anything that we hold back in the subconscious, that basically contributes to a negative state. And so when we work with our natal chart, we begin to understand our nature. But then the transits that are constantly happening and the aspects and the angles that are made to our natal chart also provide opportunities to take action and strengthen our lives, or to focus on personal mastery or healing. And so astrology is not a single or singular static state. It's always happening. And there are always aspects and connections and energies that are stimulating us to grow, to heal from the past, to embrace our strengths, our gifts, to manifest our purpose in the world. And this is the beauty of it. Most people know it only as their, well, really as their zodiac sign. And that's just scratching the surface. To me, judging someone by their zodiac sign is kind of like judging them by their skin color in a way. It's signism, right? So
So, I've never heard that before, but
we'll make a new term. It's signism. Don't judge by their zodiac sign. And so we need to tell that to all the single people in the world who are dismissing people based on their zodiac sign or coworkers.
yeah. And also, astrology can be extremely practical when applied to daily life. What is one astrological insight people can start using immediately to bring more clarity or balance into their routines?
Keep your eyes out for the full moon. Now, what do I mean by that? Well, the full moon is, like literally every 29 and a half days, we have the opportunity to plumb the depths of the subconscious to release. Now, as we begin to approach the full moon, basically 3 days before and also 3 days after, so you have, a 1 week period of full moon activity, our emotions tend to be heightened. And this is when we are more likely to experience either inner conflict or outer conflict. And it's also a time where we are more likely to experience heightened emotions, positive or negative. And so it's really important just even to keep an eye out for those full moons, because how many times have you noticed that you're highly emotional without explanation, or you've done impulsive things out of emotionality? And so I always tell people, if you want to get started with astrology, start to work with the full moons, because first of all, each and every one of them has a different flavor. And so you have that opportunity to start to understand the different energies of astrology, because no two full moons are the same. Not only do they cycle through the zodiac signs, every 29 and a half days, but also they have different aspects that they make every time, because astrology is not static, right? Everything is always moving. And so as you keep an eye out for the full moon, you know that you have that opportunity to explore what gets brought up, because the full moon will always bring up themes for healing. And so if you find yourself, say, at the next full moon feeling resentful because you feel used, you're always doing things for other people, but there's never time in the day for yourself. Well, then that's bringing up themes of balance for healing, or themes of relationships and reciprocity for healing. And then the next full moon, it could be that your mind is always in the future and you're finding yourself anxious. And so it can bring up themes of anxiety for healing. And so instead of succumbing to it, this is your opportunity to actually look at what's happening, to be an observer, and then to do the reflection, the healing work that's necessary, so that the next time a similar full moon comes up, you can say that you've engaged it from a better state.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and that simplifies the journey beautifully, showing that even small steps with astrology can create meaningful shifts.
Well, the journey of 1,000 miles begins with a single step, right?
Yeah.
And so every full moon provides you with that opportunity. And especially today, people are always looking for the healing that changes everything. Yeah, they're looking for the magic pill. And I mean, I wish that existed. It doesn't. It is through dedicated, consistent, and conscientious effort, as a result of loving yourself enough to make the effort that truly brings healing and self-mastery. And that's what astrology was always meant to bring people. It was meant to be part of a practice of knowing thyself.
Yes, absolutely. And what an enlightening conversation with Alexandra. A reminder that astrology is not a prediction, but perspective. It invites us to understand our inner landscape, to honor our patterns, and to navigate life with greater intention and curiosity. If today's insights inspired you, let be a nudge to explore the sky not as something distant, but as something mirror reflecting your own unfolding story. Keep seeking your inner light and let the stars guide your next step.